People are suggesting that he hasn't won the IBF belt. Well, he has, because really that should have been a fight for the IBF belt against Hrgović. So he's beaten Hrgović and he's the rightful champion. I think it's a fascinating fight. I don't go with the camp that suggests that Anthony Joshua is fully rehabilitated, because ultimately he's fought fighters that haven't really hit him back at this moment in time. Jermaine Franklin had a little go, but ultimately Helenius got knocked out without landing a glove on him. Volin was nowhere near him, and Ngannou was done with what should have been done with by Tyson Fury. So I think that if Daniel detonates on him, I've said it the other day, and the snake oil salesman didn't like it, that he'll get PTSD, because he'll take him back to a space where the question is that Anthony Joshua hasn't wanted to go deep in the trenches. There's a distinct possibility that Daniel Dubois is going to drag him in there, and if he does, it's going to be a fascinating fight, because he's got the power. We were writing about this kid, or Jeff Powell, and Frank will remember this, 3 or 4 years ago before the Joyce fight, as forget Joshua, forget Tyson Fury, this kid, Dynamite Daniel Dubois, is the one to watch. Yep. And then we've seen challenges happen. And I think the Hrgović, I expect him to beat Jarrell Miller. I don't think Frank's right about the opposition with Jarrell Miller, but he's certainly right about the opposition that he's fought in terms of Filip Hrgović. Because
do you see Dubois, Simon, as a top-tier heavyweight?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure he wins this fight, but I think there's a bloody good chance that he might.
You know, there are times I listen to TalkSport because I really enjoy some of the stuff that goes on it. There's other times, like when Simon Jordan is talking to Frank Warren, where you kind of have to listen to it just for a theatrical point of view, just to see what Simon Jordan comes out with when he's talking to Frank Warren, and what kind of nonsense he comes out with, more to the point. And in this one, they're in Dusseldorf, they're over at the Euros. That didn't stop him talking to Frank Warren. And they were talking about, obviously, Joshua versus Dubois, or so we should really say Dubois versus Joshua, he is the champion. And Simon Jordan, he really doesn't, like, with Simon Jordan isn't really a boxing guy. I mean, I don't believe his background was really ever really in boxing. I think he was the owner of Crystal Palace or something like that. But boxing is something that, you know, over the last kind of couple of years, we've started hearing him talk more a little bit about, and he's very selective with who he puts on the spot. Like, we've seen Simon Jordan put Eddie Hearn on the spot, and whether you agree or disagree, sometimes you might feel that he goes a little bit too far. He lets his animosity towards Hearn, which it's definitely there, get in the way of the interview, and it's really just him trying to, you know, chastise Eddie Hearn and critique him and this, that and the other. But then when you see him with Frank Warren, it's the complete polar opposite. And it's really a weird one. I don't really know why, because I could understand it if it was maybe TNT, because they're obviously the network that show Queensberry fights, if they were, you know, a little bit more complimentary. You know, not that they're not, but you know what I mean. But TalkSport are essentially external. You know, they're just another platform. And yeah, Simon Jordan really, really seems to be in Frank Warren's good books. And if he ever does critique Frank Warren, it's never anything major or anything like that. And in this one, he's talking about, obviously, Joshua versus Dubois, saying that Dubois really, obviously we know he's the IBF champion, he got elevated to full champion, but him saying stuff like, well, it should have been on the line for Joshua or for Dubois versus Filip Hrgović. It's like, well, hang on a minute, yeah, that fight, that undisputed fight did just happen a fortnight prior. So, you know, the IBF, they're quick to act, but are they really going to be that quick? You know, how are you going to order a fight or strip someone for not fighting a guy when he's fighting someone else in the meantime? If you think logically about that for a few seconds. But he talked about Daniel Dubois. And Daniel Dubois, certainly with Filip Hrgović, being a better opponent than Joshua has fought in his last couple of fights. And I don't really doubt that, to be honest with you. And I do think him fighting Big Farmer Miller and Filip Hrgović back to back, and obviously losing in a losing effort to Alexander Usyk, they are better than what Joshua's been fighting or the opponents he's been facing, and I don't really see any problem with that. What I do see, what I do see a problem with is, as you'll see from the snippet I played at the start of the video, him acting like Joshua hasn't done any developing or learning in those fights. And I know some people would say, well, what is he really going to learn at this point in his career? Well, Joshua was going into that Jermaine Franklin fight off the back of 2 back-to-back defeats to Alexander Usyk in both fights, where he literally tried absolutely everything and still came up short, and, you know, had that bit of a moment in the ring after the second fight. And he was coming back in, probably with his confidence quite a bit low, looked very gun-shy against Jermaine Franklin. He talks about Filip Hrgovic not being able to land a glove on him, although Filip Hrgovic did, to be fair, land a couple of shots. He did bloody Joshua's nose up a little bit. He certainly saw that in the post-fight. But yeah, Hrgovic wasn't the original opponent. They were trying to do Dillian Whyte. No fault to Joshua's. That fight didn't happen. He then fights out of Aleem, who, to be fair, was coming in off the back of a win over Murat Gassiev. Now, how useful is Murat Gassiev at heavyweight? That's a very good question. He's done virtually nothing at heavy. He's really done virtually nothing since he fought Alexander Usyk 6 years ago now. Roughly, actually, right about this time 6 years ago, he fought Alexander Usyk. So yeah, I can see what you're getting at with that one, fair enough, right? And Joshua knew out of Aleem very well. Familiarity breeds contempt, but Joshua obviously knew exactly what he was dealing with, had an easy job. And as Simon Jordan says correctly against Francis Ngannou, that was the performance Tyson Fury should have had. He is saying, worse to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but with Joshua, if he gets hit by Daniel Dubois, he'll get that PTSD. And I think the PTSD he's referring to is the Andy Ruiz fight. And yeah, look, a lot of people wonder, is Joshua over that fight? And, you know, Carl Froch last week alluded to the fact, I think it was last week in one of his videos, alluded to the fact that he feels Joshua quit, or he flat out accused Joshua of quitting against Andy Ruiz, which is something that me personally, I don't feel was the case. Do I feel like Joshua knew the fight was on the verge of being stopped? Yeah. Do I think that had the referee, I think it was Michael Griffin refereeing that night, had he allowed Anthony Joshua to continue, that inevitably in that 7th round, if he'd have gone back out, he would have jumped in and stopped the fight sooner or later? Yeah, he probably would have. But did Anthony Joshua, well, I'll give you an example. Did Anthony Joshua voluntarily take a knee and choose to sit out the count? No. Yeah, he went down, he got back up. Some would say, oh, but the mouthpiece. Yeah, or he could have just been looking for some more time. I mean, it's a veteran move. If you're hurt, if you're worried about the fight, you spit the mouthpiece out, the referee wipes it off, gives you a little bit more time to recover. So there you go, you gotta take that into consideration. I don't feel as though he quit, but I do feel as though Simon Jordan, is he on now? And of course he has to use Eddie Hearn, the snake oil salesman. He didn't quite like that. Do I think that there could be some scars still there from the Ruiz fight? Possibly. No, genuinely, I do. I do think that that could possibly be the case. Yes, it was 5 years ago. Joshua has taken defeat since then. But in both those fights to Alexander Usyk, he was hurt against Alexander Usyk, certainly in the last round against Alexander Usyk, but he was never in that position that he was against Andy Ruiz. And I think as well with Joshua in the 12th round against Usyk, he was fatigued as well. You got to remember that. But he's never been in that position where he's been hit with a big shot, his legs have gone, he's gone down, and he's just been like a deer in the headlights, which is kind of what happened that night in New York 5 years ago. He's never been in that position. And it's fair to say, and if someone said this, I wouldn't argue it in the slightest, that Daniel Dubois is the biggest puncher Joshua has fought since Vladimir Klitschko. I wouldn't rule that out. I mean, I wouldn't say that that's a crazy thing to say. Some might argue that he's an even bigger puncher. I mean, thank God I've never been hit by either of them. I wouldn't have liked to have been. But I think Klitschko was a tremendous puncher. I'd say he probably was the bigger puncher, but Dubois is I think most people will tell you that you wouldn't want to get hit. You wouldn't want to give Dubois a free shot. You're going to be in all sorts of trouble. If Joshua takes a shot from Daniel Dubois, could the demons of that Ruiz fight rear their ugly head? It's possible. You know, I mean, you don't really know until a fighter is in that kind of position again. If he's in it and he has to come. If you think about it like this, with Daniel Dubois, we've kind of seen that. We've seen it in the Jarrell Miller fight, where he was in a really, really tricky position early on in that fight. You could see the confidence was kind of coming out of him a bit. You know, he wasn't in the position Joshua was in, where he was rocked, he was hurt, he was dropped twice, he was tired. It wasn't like that, but it was just an uncomfy position. He came through it. Who's to say Joshua now with a lot, because he does have a lot more confidence, he's a lot more meanness and spite to him, Joshua, now, which I'm liking to see. I don't like the, as I say, I never really liked the whole, you know, oh, stay humble, all this, that and the other. I didn't like that. I never felt that was the real Joshua. I think Joshua just needed to be, you know, seek and destroy, which is what we're kind of getting now. I think he's a lot more circumspect with it, in a sense of, yeah, he is seek and destroy, but he's not going in there being reckless. And I don't think he'll do that against Dubois. But where am I going with this? Do I think he'll get PTSD? I think that there could be some scars there that could be opened if he takes a flush shot from Dubois. Question is if, because Dubois is pretty open himself, and I've no doubt in my mind that Anthony Joshua can hurt him like Daniel Dubois can hurt Anthony Joshua. And if Joshua does get hit with Dubois, it will be interesting to see how he comes through it. But I think personally for me, he'll come through it okay. I see Joshua winning this fight. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I see Joshua winning this fight. It just seems almost with Simon Jordan. And I mean, with Simon Jordan, if you listen to that interview he gave with Frank Warren, or that talk he did with Frank Warren, the snippet that I played at the start of this, it's just the same old. You know, we talked about this not being the first time Dubois has done, you know, a big arena, like a stadium, which it isn't. He obviously fought Alexander Usyk in Poland last year, saying the crowd will be against him, which, you know, they were definitely going to be against him, against Usyk that night, 100%. And then saying possibly the referee, and you're like, come on, really? You insinuating that as well now, Jordan? Really? The referee was against Dubois as well? Didn't seem that way to me. Didn't seem that way to me on fight night. Seemed like a pretty impartial referee, to be honest with you. Who was the referee that night? Was it Lou? No. I can't remember who the referee that night was. But yeah, Simon Jordan, his thoughts on Anthony Joshua Dubois. Joshua could have PTSD if he gets caught by Dubois. It will be interesting to see how he'll react, yes. If he gets hurt... if Dubois lands flush, there's a good chance Joshua doesn't get up. But if Joshua gets rocked and stunned, you know... People forget. They're quick to remember the Andy Ruiz fight. People are quick to remember that. People are quick to forget Joshua was dropped very heavily against Vladimir Klitschko in round number 6. And what did he do? Came through it. And a fight where he was knackered. Absolutely knackered. And he had a really hard 5th round as well, even though he dropped Klitschko. You go back and look at that round 5. I mean, he started the round good, he dropped Klitschko, but he was knackered by the end, and he was shifting some big punches. And he was dropped in the 6th round. Came through adversity, had a good check, came through it there. So just because he didn't do it against Ruiz, that doesn't mean he's not going to do it this time if it happens against Daniel Dubois. So that's my thoughts. Simon Jordan, when it comes to Frank Warren, you know, I mean, Simon Jordan, I think, isn't he picking Fury to beat Usyk in the rematch? You know, it's like, no matter what Eddie Hearn does, bad. No matter what Frank Warren does, good. And that's it. You know, it's really just that black and white. Eddie Hearn bad, Frank Warren good, end of. That's the way it is with Simon Jordan. That's how it seems. So let me know your thoughts on what Simon Jordan was saying at the start of the video. Your thoughts on Joshua Dubois. Do you think that if Daniel Dubois hits Joshua really, really hard, he could end up having a little bit of PTSD, flashbacks to the Andy Ruiz fight? Let me know in the comment section below. Let me know your thoughts. Could he have flashbacks to the sparring session? Because here's the funny thing. Frank Warren making out as though the Hrgovic-Dubois sparring session was nothing, saying, oh, that was years ago where Hrgovic, you know, Daniel Dubois pretty much admitted to it, gave Daniel Dubois the business in sparring. That's nothing. That's nothing. Okay, yeah, that's nothing. He's literally Daniel Dubois bringing up the Joshua sparring session. So if it's nothing with that one, where Dubois was young, and again, he is still young, he's only 26. But if it was nothing for Hrgovic, why should it be anything for Anthony Joshua? You know? There you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed the video. Smash the like button if you could. Subscribe if you haven't already. Peace.